make a move and the bunny gets it.
I said, put the bunny back in the box. Why couldn't you put the bunny back in the box?
It's showtime.
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
I wanna know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I wanna know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Monday night, and you'll have to give me a second or two. It is still playing my music. StreamYards has been doing this last few times I've been on. So, okay, good. It cut out. Nope. It's starting to play again. Not sure what that feedback loop is about, but the other night the only thing that fixed it was me popping back out and popping back in. Hopefully I won't have to do that tonight. Anyway, uh, so here we are. Yesterday, Mr. Kirk, Charlie Kirk, had a service that I don't think anybody would deny was impressive. I mean, even the people who were vehemently bad mouthing him, and that was a lot of people that showed up, including heads of state and industry, all for a 31-year-old man who they've done their best to try to say is irrelevant. There's a famous TikTok of this lady who said, "You know what's even better? You know what's even greater about this is that Charlie's a nobody, and this is going to affect nobody or no one, and he's going to be gone out of our sight, out of mind, And it's not really that TikTok has not really aged well. I think I saw last that the lady had erased it, and the rumor is that she lost her job. So let's pour one out for the lady who lost. Anyway, I know Charlie wouldn't approved of that, but no big deal. He's not here to be upset. So Anyway, so all that have lost their jobs over celebrating a man's murder. I found Jack. Hey, Rabbit. Hey, man. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. But yeah, for all that have celebrated the death of a young man who really was benign in a lot of ways. Um, okay. Thank you for letting me know. I had to switch mics. Evidently, the mic that I was using disappeared on me. So, um, thank you for being patient with me. The sound's not the best. I'll just have to deal with it. Back. Okay, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But anyway, it's me, the guy from Six. Yeah, I got you. I got you. I knew who you were. Well, the thing about it is they are trying to say that we're the people on the right are engaging in cancel culture. Now, it's weird that they're calling it cancel culture, mainly because up till now they were calling it consequence culture. In other words, you f around, you f out, and they just had all these wonderful streams and TikToks and Instagram reels and and X Spaces, all about how it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture. If you step out of line, you can, and they can dig through your back stuff, find something that you did a few years ago, and then let your employer know that do you want this person working for you? And then the employer is like, oh no, we don't want people coming after us. So and then but they didn't always stop there. They would send SWAT teams to people's houses. They would send pizza orders, on cash on delivery. They would dox them online, dox their kids. I know that's happened more than once. And so they didn't just stop with the cancellation of the job. They would try to cancel their life. Ed Piscor, a individual who used to be part of a show called Cartoonist Kayfabe, I think, a comic kayfabe or something like that. Anyway, I never really watched it. He wasn't my cup of tea. We were on politically aligned, but Ed, upon achieving one of his lifelong goals, had his work being displayed in a Pittsburgh museum. And suddenly these ladies crawled out of the woodwork. And one of them was supposedly underage when he had to make contact with her, even though she initiated the contact, even though she was the one that first approached him. And she was the one that, started the whole entire thing. Somehow Ed was a pedophile because he had, had exchanged chats with this girl, even though as soon as he found out she was underage, he cut off the chats. Suddenly this ex-girlfriend comes forward, and they ruined, and then people started dogpiling, including people from Comicsgate. There's revisionist history where they're trying to say that they didn't have anything to do with it. But this group that was uncovered a few years ago by Penny Parker of Bounding into Comics, they got involved. This group that supposedly didn't exist got involved. And next thing you know, Ed is dangling from a rope in a park. And he left this basically a suicide note. And in the suicide note, he says, no person is able to withstand millions of people, hundreds of people, crawling through their lives and acting negatively towards them at one time. That's people aren't equipped for that. And Ed, but he was absolutely right. But that's the kind of cancellation that they were doing. The kind of, quote unquote cancellation that is currently going on is people are showing boss people and places of work what these people are actually saying. They're kind of using the libs of TikTok model, and this is what they're actually saying. This is the TikTok, this is the real, this is the X space, and this is what they're actually saying. Is this the person you want working for you? A person that would absolutely celebrate the murder of a 31-year-old man who really did nothing but talk to people. I mean, if he had any kind of skeletons in his closet, they would have been revealed by now. But all they can find is out of context clips. For the most part, he was an Eagle Scout, never drank, never smoked, never did drugs, never slept around that they can discover, and was clean as whistle. It was like the worst person of all for them to try to attempt to smear. Now, and met the love of his life, this incredible woman named Erica, had 2 kids. And to tell you how much under threat he was, if you watch, you've never seen those kids' faces. Every time they were on camera, they were turned away from the camera. That's how much under threat Charlie was. That's the kind of world he was living in. That's the kind of world we're all living in right now. It's a world where you can't let your kids be seen on camera because some nut job might come after them. And somebody's like, well, he was paranoid. He might have had a right to be paranoid. Maybe he should have been more paranoid. That argument can also be made. But today, everybody is talking about, the service yesterday and the speeches that were made, and the incredible speech that Erica herself made, doing one of the bravest things I've ever seen, when she openly forgave the man who took her husband from her and her kids and the rest of the world, because of words, because he didn't like the way things he was saying. That was his motive. He didn't like what Charlie was saying. And people like Jimmy Kimmel over the years saying that, well, if they get in charge, they're going to eliminate all trans people. And if trans people can't express their transness, then they'll all commit suicide. And so, i.e., if you do anything to curtail a trans person's expression, then you're basically killing them. That's the mental gymnastics that have been taking place. And so, out of defending his loved one, this mixed up, screwed up kid crawls up in 30-06 deer rifle and takes out one of the leading voices of a generation, because they told him that Charlie's words was going to kill his partner. All these people backtracking today, all these people trying to cover it up, when they said, that words are violence, not allowing trans people to be trans means that they're going to kill themselves every time. And so if anybody is calling for the detransition of individuals, they're essentially calling for their murder. And so it all gets equated in the heads of somebody who is on a lot of SSRIs, like I'm pretty sure Tyler Robinson was on. And he crawls up there with his grandfather's deer rifle and takes out a brave young man who had accomplished more in 31 years than most of us will ever accomplish in our entire lives. What's up, Wook? Hey, man, not feeling better and not feeling good today. I hope you feel better, dude. Anyway. So, what does it mean to be a martyr? And why does Charlie fit the definition of martyr? Okay. Martyrs are people who basically stand up for their beliefs and are murdered for those beliefs. And no problem, man. But I've got some examples of some martyrs here. Now, this first one I didn't know about. This is Perpetua of Carthage, young woman, met her death in the Carthaginian arena, Ori Entertainment. She was a Christian, and I've never heard of her, but her name was Perpetua. Joan of Arc. I've actually done shows on Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, basically this young teenage girl, believes she heard from God that she was to restore the monarchy of France. And so she left her little peasanthood that was just fraught with danger, so much so that she cut her hair and dressed as a man so she wouldn't be molested along the way. And she got to the king, and because the king was a little weasel who liked the idea of someone else taking all the risks, he gave her the army, and she won several battles where she stood up front. She was in white armor and she was waving a flag, and then a little weasel, to consolidate his power because he was afraid of her, basically sold her out to the British, and she was burned at the stake as a witch. No, Joan of Arc, definitely a martyr. Okay. William Tyndale. William Tyndale is really interesting. Tyndale basically believed that the Bible should be in the hands of everyone. And so William Tyndale basically created a Bible that could be read by the common peasant. And for that, he was charged with heresy. He was strangled, and his body was burned at the stake. So it wasn't just enough to strangle the man to death. But he's another victim of Henry VIII, pretty much. But the Tyndale Bible is one of the most important documents in all of Christendom. Joseph Smith Jr., the Mormon, they're saying he's a martyr. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm not gonna go with that one. Obviously, this list is pretty dubious. Other people that would be considered martyrs. Martin Luther King Jr. is considered a martyr. Now, I think over the years, his tarnish. He had some very clear communist leanings that have come out. But Dream is just an amazing speech. And so, whatever you can say about him personally, he was kind of a womanizer, and some other things have come out. But he had a dream, and he died for the dream. So that makes him a martyr. There's all sorts of martyrs throughout the church history. Paul was beheaded for the faith. Peter was, by church history, crucified upside down. There's not really a lot of documentation of that. It's just church tradition. All of the disciples, except for John, were martyred, which is pretty interesting if you are a believer believing that it's a hoax, that they're all lying. Then it's a little problematic that they allowed themselves to die for their faith, right? It's a little problematic. Of course, if you're dumb enough to believe that Christ didn't exist in the first place, with a preponderance of artifact information that we have that he did indeed exist, then you're going to believe something stupid like that anyway. It's just that's just the fact. But why does Charlie qualify as a martyr? Because Charlie believed in something. He put his life on the line for something. He stood for it. And the person who killed him directly because of that thing. That's the very definition of martyrdom. Okay, very definition. Now, Benny Johnson, he was a friend of Charlie. Charlie's pretty much the reason why we know Benny. But Benny keeps bringing up Saint Stephen. Now, I think it's pretty accurate, pretty one-to-one example. Okay, early part of the church, before the Spirit came on them in Pentecost, they were kind of all up in one place, and they drew lots for the 12th disciple because they thought they needed 12 disciples because Jesus called 12 disciples and Judas was dead, and they chose a guy named Matthias. Obviously, nobody ever heard of, because God wanted, Saul of Tarsus, later to become Paul, to be the 12th disciple. So I think God probably had a better take on it. But there was a problem that the church was growing too big for the apostles to directly, take care of the widows and orphans, and there was complaints, and they couldn't do day-to-day, work necessary and do the preaching and see to the spreading of the gospel. So they appointed disciples, and one of the first ones chosen was a guy named Stephen. Had a dual citizenship. Stephen is a Greek name. It means crown. Also my name. I was named for him. But he had dual citizenship, but because when they first one's chosen, Philip was the guy who later, witnessed to the Ethiopian. That's later on in Acts. Interesting story. But Stephen basically was the first martyr in that he showed up at the temple and started criticizing the chief priests and scribes and Sadducees, and basically gave them a whole treatise about who the Messiah was to be, and to declare Jesus Christ was the Messiah, and they criticized them for murdering the Messiah. They didn't take it well. In particular, a young student of Gamaliel, Pharisee of Pharisees, a rising star named Saul of Tarsus. But Saul later made statements in his writings that seem to indicate that Stephen's death stayed with him, and that had a big had not only did he get knocked on his mule on the way to Damascus, but when you see he got knocked off his mule, he's like, "Who art thou? Who are you, Lord?" Because he's seen that light before shining off of Stephen's face. That's speculation, but it does say that Stephen was shining with the light of heaven before he gave up the ghost, which is what happens when you're being stoned to death. But anyway, so that martyrdom basically directly created Apostle Paul, who was the greatest writer of the New Testament, also was responsible for the spreading of the gospel into Europe, and is considered the greatest evangelist that has ever existed. Not bad. So another example would be John the Baptist. John the Baptist was, when he was martyred, basically for pointing out that Herod shouldn't be marrying the woman that he was married to, because that was in the eyes of the law, improper, basically incest. She didn't like it, and so first chance she got, she had John be beheaded. All that Herod gave her whatever she wanted, and her mother had instructed her to ask for John the Baptist's head on a silver platter, and that's what she got. Yeah. Most people would want a Mercedes or, something else, but her mother had her ask for the, man's head. But what happened was John's followers all joined Jesus and doubled his ministry. And so anytime that basically gave Jesus like the power, the influence to finish out his work. It might not have been able to if it wasn't for John's death, martyrdom. So the pattern is God will raise someone up. That person will stand for the gospel, stand for all things good. The person's usually brave. They're usually a shooting star They're usually pretty young, but have accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. And then they're usually killed brutally in a very memorable way. I'm sure people still remember Joan of Arc's screams as she's being burned alive for the rest of their days. But we still know about her, don't we? We still talk about her. She's inspired generations. She probably wouldn't have wanted to be a human torch, but it was used. It was used for purposes. Because of her sacrifice, because of her martyrdom, France was able to throw off the vestiges of English rule, and she restored the monarchy in death in a way that she couldn't have done in life. Unfortunately, the little weasel who sold her out became the king. But tomato, tomato, right? Another martyr is Jesus Christ himself. So he fits the pattern. Relatively young, stood for something, spread the gospel, and was murdered very dramatically. And if you believe the record on the shroud, in the most horrible way possible. The record on the shroud is pretty horrific. That they could do that to another human being is, it's barbarism. But by his stripes we are healed, by his sacrifice and his resurrection. You can't be resurrected unless you die. So he had to die, but he had to do it in such a way that fulfilled Scripture, and he had to do it in such a memorable way that him showing up later could not be disputed. And so Jesus Christ was martyr. Now, throughout the years, there's people that have been labeled kind of like martyrs. Some people think Abraham Lincoln was martyred. And then, JFK martyred, But the thing about it is they didn't definitively, they weren't spreading the gospel. They had their flaws. And I think martyrs, by in total, most of the time, are flawless human beings. And in that their deaths mean something to people because they don't deserve them. For the most part, when somebody's martyred, the thing that it creates in the people that are inspired by it is a kind of anger, a kind of like focused rage. You saw this in Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller talks about the focused rage that he feels. It's just not fair. This person's a good person. This person means something to a lot of people, and their death, it animates. It doesn't like ossify. Okay, freeze in place, make rock. Kind of like set in stone. Most of the time it animates. Most of the time it motivates. A martyrdom essentially is the beginning. Some people have been quoting that when you kill a tyrant, you end his rule, his reign. But when you kill a martyr, their reign is just. And the thing is that, all the martyrs, throughout history, the ones that are true martyrs, the ones that qualify as martyrs, most of the time, they were good people. They were esteemable people, people that you want to emulate people who left a pattern to follow, people that were highly respected, and people who most of the time you find this anomaly of the motivation that they had in their young lives to make the biggest impact possible. Usually they're hardworking, usually they were wide reaching. And so when they die, it makes a huge crater where they used to be. Yesterday, we saw an estimated 300,000 people show up for a funeral. It might be 30,000. I'm thinking it might be 30,000 in the main arena and more in overflow. I think 100,000 might be the number, but I didn't really look it up. A whole bunch of people. Let's just say a whole bunch of people. You've had heads of state. You've had people, heads of commerce. You had ministers. You know, you had all sorts of people from all walks of life that were there. I just saw a video. I just saw an entry where somebody's Uber driver said that he was Charlie's Uber driver from the airport one time, and they had this great conversation, and that he was going to go to church, but he was going to go to Charlie's funeral with his two grandsons, and he sent the guy who posted it a picture of him at the funeral with his grandsons. And I showed a video on here of a young man who his wife bought him a suit for their anniversary, and he was talking about wanting to use the suit and go to church for the first time, and and he wanted to do it for Charlie. And later on, I saw the follow-up that he had acquired like 1 million followers or something on TikTok overnight because of that video. And he was just like flabbergasted about it. But he's following through. He's going to church with that suit, But that's one of so many. I mean, every video I've watched, every thread that I've read on X, all have the same thing. I was an agnostic. I was an atheist. I was raised in church but fell away. I've never been religious, but I think I'm going to give this thing a shot. And never watched the Charlie video. After he died, I decided to watch the Charlie video, went down the rabbit hole, and now I'm interested in this God person. I've changed my mind about a lot of things. I've seen a lot of black people go down the Charlie Kirk rabbit hole thinking that they're going to find a racist because they get told he's racist. And they found a man who believes deeply in meritocracy, was nothing but affectionate and respectful towards any black person who decided to debate with him. And he had a lot of black friends that have come out of the woodwork or talked about him. He was behind the Black Caucus, the young Black Caucus that went to the White House, the early days of Trump's first presidency. That was Charlie. Charlie was behind that. And a lot of those young black Republicans, have come out and talked about that was the beginning of their relationship, and that he had encouraged them ever since. And so it doesn't sound very much like a racist guy, But see, they're making these narratives that always happens with a martyr or somebody who's murdered and can no longer speak for themselves. Then they start smearing them. They start putting words in their mouth. They start, saying, well, he said one time that if his 10-year-old daughter got pregnant, that he wouldn't let her have an abortion. That gets thrown around a lot. But first of all, it's a straw man argument. 10-year-old girls don't have the equipment to get pregnant. That they're not even those apparatuses aren't even formed yet. Secondly, that basically was thrown in his face, and he's like, well, am I going to double up the tragedy and murder an innocent child who had nothing to do with the way it was conceived? And so that's how they were smearing him, using that straw man argument. But I've seen several things like that. But what they don't understand, and this has been pointed out by people brighter than me, smarter than me, better spoken than me, but when you have a good man without reproof, without blot or blemish, spotless lamb, and he would argue with me about that. He was very humble. But when you take somebody like that Eagle Scout, young Republicans, somebody who spent his entire existence trying to serve people, trying to restore America's dream to the younger generation, trying to straighten out the younger generation from all the indoctrination. Somebody who spent his entire life wanting to reach out and change the course of this lost, screwed up generation. And so when you murdered somebody like that, that is truly a good man in about every conceivable way, that you can't change the narrative, especially now with the internet, because Charlie can speak for himself. He's the first martyr that's been able to speak for himself. And there's been so many times where somebody has said that Charlie said this and Charlie said that. And I was like, did you watch the actual video? I don't have to. Yes, you do. You do. You made an accusation. You got to watch the video. If you don't watch the video, then you don't have a right to make the accusation. And there's been times where that person's got back to me and it's like, well, that's not what he said. No, it's not what he said. He said there's a lot of things going around that he supposedly said that it's been debunked. And at the end of the day, what it's done is 3 million man march, or 3 million family march, or whatever that they had in Britain the other day. Yes, it was planned. Tommy Robinson had it planned. And yes, all the permits are lined up and all that stuff. But Tommy was shocked because he said, after Charlie got gunned down, he suddenly was inundated with people saying, I want to do this for Charlie. We need to do this for Charlie. And so he made that the focus, that Charlie was a big advocate for free speech on the planet. And that's what they're wanting in England, is free speech, the right to assemble, the right to, have their grievances known. 3 million people showed up. That's not their numbers. That's the numbers of the cops. And in South Korea right now, there's been multiple marches. And they're wearing shirts that say in Korean, "We are Charlie." There's been, I've seen videos from Australia. I've seen videos in New Zealand where they did the haka dance. It's just for a fallen warrior, the Maori down there. They don't do it for just anybody, and they did one for Charlie. I've seen pockets of people several times where people in like deep blue areas in California had like candlelight vigils, and thousands of people have showed up. Something's happening because God uses martyrdom. It's one of his most powerful tools, especially if the man's a man like Charlie. And so, who are they? Who did they pick for their martyr? They picked Jimmy Kimmel. That's who they picked for their martyr. And they're going around saying, "Oh, we are Jimmy," right? And it was announced today, ABC is bringing the bastard back. His show is returning. Well, if you were pushing free speech or worried about free speech going away, then why the heck weren't you worried the biggest free speech advocate in modern America was gunned down by somebody that didn't like what he was saying? Why is that his free speech, him being silent, why did that not matter? Because they don't believe in free speech. They believe in only speech that they like. And that's a distinction. They're not talking about free speech. They're talking about their speech. They're not talking about free speech. They are talking about curated speech. Speech that pushes their agenda. And if that speech is impaired or imperiled or in any way blocked, then oh my gosh, free speech is under risk. What's bigger attack on free speech? A multimillionaire, sarcastic jackass who hasn't been funny in over a decade getting rightly censored or put off the air after he smeared a whole entire movement and smeared a good man's name gleefully, the little chuckle with the little sneer that he does everything with. That's the guy that they've decided to hitch their wagon to. And he has consequences for what he says. It says are provable lies. That's a consequence for that. Or, what's bigger attack on free speech? That guy getting consequences for lying and smearing a whole entire movement of people and a good man's name, or a 31-year-old kid getting gunned down in front of his wife and kids by somebody that didn't like what he said. What's up, Cool? Tommy also said free speech is the hill we die on. Tommy Robinson, man. He's fought for it, man. He's wound up in jail multiple times. He almost didn't make it out last time. They were putting him in jail for speaking out against rape gangs in England. They put him in jail with Muslims. Yeah. As a matter of fact, he every time he goes into jail, he has to worry about what's in his food because the people preparing his food are Muslim. What's the documentary that he put together? You'll make the hair raise up on the back of your neck. He's suffered for it. Unlike Charlie, though, he's still kicking. But it's not from lack of trying. They have tried to make him a martyr. But God has tarried with him. And Tommy has been deported from 2 countries in one day due to being a national threat. Yep. Absolutely. And they tried to make Donald Trump a martyr. Now, people are like, well, Donald Trump is definitely not spotless, though. He's not without blemish or spot, you know. But he does, Donald Trump does definitely stand for something. And he almost got murdered for it. That close. That close. And he knows it. It's changed him. The 47th president is a lot different from the 45th president. We won't talk about 46 at all. But it's like he was saying the other day that he's not Charlie Kirk. Charlie would have prayed for his enemies. He would have showed love to his enemies. And Donald Trump's like, I'm not Charlie. I hate my enemies. I do not wish them well. And everybody's like, see? I'm like, the man is honest. You know, he's honest. He's like, Charlie's a better man than I am. He'd be disappointed in me by saying that, but I'm going to be honest. I don't wish him well. I can't hide it. What would you rather? Would you rather somebody lie about that? I don't know. It made me like him more. Maybe love Trump more, you know. But at the end of the day, martyrdom is the most powerful tool that God has in his tool chest. And every time there's been a martyrdom, there's been a massive move, a change that God wanted implemented. It could only happen through blood shed, such as the blood that saves us all. And so this, as horrible as it is, as unthinkable as it is, martyrdom is a tool in the hands of God. Sometimes the blood of saints is the grease that moves the wheels in the direction that God needs us to go. I mean, when you see of the Christians, you know, fed used as torches in the garden of the emperor, and all the horrible things that happened to Christians in the early church. And yet within a couple of generations, Rome became Christian. It took all those deaths to make it happen. It took many people dying well, dying honorably, dying courageously. Sometimes that's the best witness we've got. As horrible as I thought it is, but you think the silly buggers would have figured this out? No. Nope, the one silly bugger who's behind it all has never figured it out. He keeps doing it. He keeps trying to stop movements by murdering people. And he just spreads it wider. There is overseas the biggest clampdown on Christianity that's going on right now. In the 20th century, there's more Christians that have died for their faith 20th and the 21st century, than all the previous centuries combined, all the way back to Jesus himself. And yet the church is bigger and stronger than it ever has been. Why is that? Martyrdom. It's like, why would a good God allow these wonderful people to die for their faith? Why would he want that? Because to the Christian, to live is Christ and to die is gain. That came from Paul's mouth himself. Probably learned that watching Stephen die. There is a verse. I don't know if anybody else has made this observation. I've brought it up to several pastors, and they all think it's pretty sound. And when I pointed it out to them, they were all like, I don't know how I've ever missed this. But Stephen says something pretty strange while he's breathing his last. He says, I see Jesus standing at the Father's right hand. Now, the verse in the Bible talks about that the honored seat by the Father's right hand is occupied by Jesus. That Jesus is seated at the Father's right hand. And except for this one time when Stephen says, I see Jesus standing at the Father's right hand. And I was kind of questioning that, I have a personal connection to Stephen, because our names. And I was like, why does Stephen see Jesus standing at the Father's right hand? But in Revelations, there's a verse about a persecuted church. I think it's Smyrna. And it says, to him who overcomes, I will give room to sit with me on my throne. The reason Stephen saw Jesus standing is because he was standing to give Stephen room to sit by the Father's right hand. Martyrdom is the highest calling. The fact that Charlie was martyred is the highest compliment that God has. And I believe that they say Charlie was staring into eternity almost immediately. I bet he saw Jesus standing. That's what I choose to believe. I believe he saw Jesus. We're just seeing the beginning of the wave. I didn't know the man, but I've cried multiple times like I lost a brother. Because I have. Watching his videos, I'm like, I would have wanted to know this man. I would have wanted to meet him, and I will someday. I will someday. R.I.P., brother. Well done. A good and faithful servant. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for hanging out with me for a little while. Sorry for the tears. I wear my heart on my sleeve. You'll see that more often than not. And but I will see you guys next time. Cruel, go to bed. It's late in Scotland. Thanks for hanging out, buddy. I appreciate it. But I will see you all next time. This has been Cooper for Telepathic Funny Comics. Follow the White Rabbit. Bye, everybody. Come on.